Thank you. Professor Panda, dear Pramod, co-panelists and friends at NICE. I'm indeed grateful to be here on this very challenging topic. So I think in this 10 minutes, what I'm quickly kind of focus on is first context in which Russia and China are building these synergies and what their kind of counter reactions are, as I would call it, to what is happening in the region. First of all, I think there's no doubt that the US believes that it is and wants to be the primary hegemonic power in the Indo-Pacific. Because since the Second World War, even during the bipolar system, the USSR, the Soviet Union, was primarily engaged with balancing the US in Europe and in the Third World. While the US was the primary power in the Pacific region with a network of alliances, interventions, and wars in Southeast Asia, Laos, Vietnam, etc. Then at the end of the bipolar system, and US unipolar primacy meant that the US started enjoying unprecedented global hegemony without opposition to its expansive security choices. Now, with this unipolarity, I will focus on one policy and three impacts. The one policy was that with this kind of triumphalism, the shift in economics and political economy to globalization that combined neoliberal reforms, financialization, shift of manufacturing to the East, whereas they retained the monopoly over knowledge and information and tech products through the the patents regime. So there were three impacts that we need to see out here. The first impact was that globalization worked to the advantage, first of all, to China, that saw this fast-paced growth in manufacturing. And according to the IMF, accounted for 28% of all growth worldwide, 2013 to 18 alone, twice the share of the US. The second trend was that after 2001, Russia started stabilizing, much of it not recognized in the world. They use their oils and commodity to revive their military and industrial side complexes and export of military industries. India was a major buyer of that, along with many others in Southeast Asia. The third trend was that some of the developing countries like Brazil, India, South Africa, and some of the ASEAN tigers, they became the middle level powers and emerging economies and started having a common understanding of the shifts in the international system. So there were two parallel geostrategic shifts. The first was the US reaction to these developments, and it came in the form of the slogan of pivot to Asia, and the redomination of the neocons and the national security doctrine, whereby the US, which always had an interest in the Pacific, their interest became, they wanted to retain this hegemony, and because it is, after a very important route, and I think the first session showed that. And every national security document in the US since 2008, 2009 saw these threats where China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, all of which are around this this constructed term of Indo-Pacific, and terrorism were a major threat. So, for example, in 2020, the national security strategy of the Republic of China, only competitor, the United States, the intent and increasingly the capacity to shape the international order. So the US national defense strategy, alongside with this strategy, calls it the pacing challenge, which they have to, kind of look at. The second shift was that these countries outside the West, the emerging countries, along with Russia and China, they formed this kind of loose pact and got invested in the idea of multipolarity and a redistribution of the concentrated political power. And then the other event and impact of all this was the operationalization of the US agenda, the proxy war in Ukraine, which really does a lot of quick, much faster shifting of these policies, where the US then at that time sought to strengthen NATO and increase its operations in the Indo-Pacific. So the US, it always has, and increasingly then is very much linked to the hotspots in this region, whether it's Taiwan, the contested islands of the South China Sea, and the Korean Peninsula and the Philippines. And it has built a framework, a network of alliances like the Quad, the new US, Japan, the Republic of Korea trilateral, the 4 new bases in the Philippines. So with all this, Russia and China have had very strong reactions. So China's methodology is twofold. One, to continue with its economic strategy and economic buildup, that is primary, unlike Russia, which is more focused on geostrategy and security. So this fits in to their compatibility, if they have an understanding, and which they do. So China continues with its Belt and Road and it's building up, but at the same time, China is also developing its military capability. China, whose naval power has taken over the US and is in this region alone. So it's focused on this region. It's not in all over the world like the US is. And with that, they seek a rejuvenation of the Chinese nation through political, social, and military modernity. And they see US as deploying, and what they used in the 20th Party Congress was a whole government effort to contain the PRC's rise, because this is an obstacle to US national strategy. And so they call for building a community of common destiny to revitalize the PRC. And you must have seen their naval documents, and the US defense last strategy of 2023 does an excellent analysis of this, where they show that now the PLA numerically is the largest navy in the world with 370 ships and submarines and etc. And it has the capacity to assert its presence, especially in the South China Sea. And they tried to build some security alliances, as with the Solomon Islands. But in my opinion, this backfired because it led to the US security and economic deals with 3 Pacific islands, Papua New Guinea, Palau, and Micronesia. So as far as Russia is concerned, earlier they didn't focus that much on the Far East, but now they see themselves as a Pacific power. Their new policies are focusing on the Far East. They have already built this new shipping routes like Vladivostok to Chennai, which is very active. India is a partner in that. The North Sea Arctic route, in which China has a great interest. And as they've stated in their Far East Economic Forum, where both the Chinese, Indians, and many Southeast Asian countries are present. So these countries feel, and their policy is that they can take advantage of both China and Russia. India, of course, doesn't want to take it. I mean, it has a competition and still a somewhat, conflictual relation with China, which is improving, but nonetheless, they do have positions of neutrality, and they have a lot of similar thinking on this region, along with what the ASEAN countries and others say. And my last point, therefore, is the strategic link or the strategic understanding, because between China and Russia. Recently, I did visit Moscow, where we had a Russia, India, China dialogue, academic dialogue. And one could see the levels of Russia-China relations go very deep into the system. It's not just a convergence of geostrategic interest. There is a dialogue on technology, on history, on discourse, on information, on hypersonics, you name it, on everything. So there is this deep understanding, which is going, the value chains which Russia had with the West, they are broken. They have had a difficult time, but now they are with the East, and they are functioning very well. So they're really very linked, and I think that they could have a collective response in the Indo-Pacific. They understand each other's strategic constraints, challenges, and methodologies, and the way forward. So it's very deep, and luckily for them, all of the ASEAN and South Asia, they're interested in their own development. They don't want to take sides. And while there are and could be escalations and spirals, one side, the US and NATO increasing their military expenditures, but the powers that temper this are the rest of the Asian powers and their neutrality. So that's where I'll end. Thank you very much.